Hey everyone, Pants here from the Skeptaholics podcast. Before we get started today, I just want to run through our socials here really quick to let you know where you can find us to keep up with the content. You can find us on Facebook at the Skeptaholics podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Skeptaholics, and you can find us on TikTok at Skeptaholics podcast. Find and download the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, Pandora, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcasts. You can even tell your Alexa-enabled device, "Hey Alexa, play the Skeptaholics podcast." Guys, liking and following on all of our social media accounts is the best way to help us out. So give us a like, give us a follow, and share with your friends. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Skeptaholics podcast, your source for all things conspiracy, true crime, unexplained, and unsolved. All we ask is that you keep an open mind and always question everything.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Skeptaholics podcast. I'm here with Jamie. How's it going?
Oh, living the dream, man. Ready to get gigantic.
Perfect. And Jake, how are you doing this week?
Good. How are you guys today?
I'm on this side of the dirt, so that's always a bright side.
Always a plus.
Yeah.
Always a plus.
Unless some people it's not, I guess, but that's a side story.
It's all about your perspective.
So I had really quickly, a guy that I work with, he's an old guy. He's extremely miserable. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he's completely insufferable. And one day I saw him and I said, "Hey, Gary, how you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, you know." And I was like, "Oh, well, at least you're on this side of the dirt, right?" And he goes, "Well, it's a matter of opinion." And I was like, "All right, Gary, have a good night. I got shit to do." So, yeah. Well, apparently for some guys, it's not a good thing, but for you, it's good.
Good. I mean, I got nowhere else I'd rather be, so this side of the dirt is good. And
That's the
you
spirit.
can cut that out if you want to put a stitch in there. That was just really fucking awkward. I wish I wasn't.
Wish you weren't so fucking awkward, bud.
I know, right? So anyway, this week we're bringing you a episode on giant skeletons, stuff like that. We apologize for the little hiatus last week. Sometimes life just happens, and there was some things that happened in a couple of our lives where we just kind of had to put the podcast on pause for a week, hit the reset button. We were really busy, and now we're back with you guys. That might happen time to time. We want to try to bring you an episode every week, but if we can't do it, just know that that's probably the reason. We don't have any intention on going anywhere. We have every intention to carry this podcast through at least as long as we have subject matter to cover. But there might be time to time where we get a week skip in an episode or something like that. So without further ado, I guess we'll roll on with some facts about the Giants here, boys. Anybody got anything they want to talk about first? Actually, you know what? Before you guys answer that, there's something that I want to talk about that I saw in a Tic Tac this week.
Uh-oh.
That kind of
Shit's gonna rot your brain.
So it's been a while since I've done this, coming into an episode and kind of went off the wall on something that I found during a week.
Boy. All right, let me put a note in quick. Hang on.
Oh boy,
that was a joke.
Yeah,
I'm gonna cut that.
So anyway,
like his part of the whole episode, just cut it out. It'll just be me and you, JD.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
Fine.
mute. Yeah, I'm gonna just mute the. I'm gonna press the little mute button.
Mute
He's gonna
me.
be talking the whole time.
So anyway, evidently, if you ask Siri how many days until 2021, it'll give you the countdown from today until the first of the year, which should be 2022. And if you ask Siri how many days until 2020, it'll go back from, okay, so it's February 21st right now, so it'll go back 52 days to January 1st. And I did this on my phone, and it was legitimate. I'm going to see if I can get it to do it again while we're recording here. I don't remember the exact wording that you had to use to get it to do it, but I thought it was kind of fucked up, especially since we talked about in the Mayan episode, and Jake had brought up, I think 2 episodes ago, maybe 3, about how the calculations on the Mayan calendar were out. But in a TikTok that I was watching, they had brought up kind of a cool point that played back into the simulation theory episode, and that was that it could signify a timeline jump. So I guess I'll see if Siri will talk to me here. Siri.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
This is going great.
Siri, how many days until 2021?
It's 313 days until then.
I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but she said it's 313 days until then. Siri, how many days until 2020?
It was 52 days ago.
So yeah, if you ask Siri those 2 questions, she tells you we're not in 2021 yet.
Yeah.
We're still in 2020.
Ask her how long till 2022.
Siri, how long until 2022?
It's 1 hour and 58 minutes until then.
Well,
military
hand your
time.
hats.
Yeah, I have my phone set on military time, so we'll try
Yeah,
January 1st, 2022.
Yeah.
Siri, how long until January 1st, 2022?
It's 10 months until then.
So if you ask her that, she says it's 10 months until 2022. But I don't know, I've tried it with some other wording and it comes up right. But if you ask her how many days until, or how many, it's how many days until 2021 and how many days until 2020, she comes up with those days. But I mean, with that being said, though, I've also seen some weird shit where you ask Alexa the right 4 questions in a row and she'll come out telling you about it's like blue something and this big conspiracy about that, and she just starts going off the wall with the most random shit. So I don't know what to think of it, but I wanted to bring it up to you guys and let you guys know what I found. I don't know if either of you 2 had heard of that one yet. I think I might have shared it with both of you. Let's get to business on giants here.
So it's been pretty common over the last, I've been seeing it probably last 6-7 years, that there's finding more and more information is starting to come out about giant skeletons being found all over the planet. And we're talking anything from 6.5 to 7 feet tall, all the way up to 20 and 30 feet tall. And there's a lot of theory out there that every time one of these is found, Smithsonian shows up, picks it up, and it's never heard or seen from again. Everything gets scrubbed. For the first few years that I started hearing about it, it was just a trickle of information coming out about this stuff. And then, of course, the disinformation starts. You got obvious photoshops, things like that. But then you start looking into like Native American lore, and you find like all these burial mounds, around the US and elsewhere around the planet that were excavated. And what did they find in them? Giant skeletons. And giant skeletons is kind of a broad term because you got to remember, once upon a time, a tall human was like 5'5". So somebody that's 6'7" is going to seem really tall.
Yeah, I was going to ask if they had like a classification, like what, why is it a giant? Because like I'm almost 6.5 feet tall myself, and so is there something in these skeletons like their femur is a certain length, and so we're classifying this as a giant skeleton, or is it just anything over 6.5 feet?
It's overall height from my understanding, but there is characteristic differences from the research that I did coming into this episode. Now, like they have I had watched a YouTube video and I can send it out to you guys. They have a partial femur. It's got the top hip joint on it, and it's only about, I'd say, maybe a foot and 3.5 inches long, somewhere right in there. They don't know the total overall length of this femur to gauge how tall this skeleton was, and they weren't able to find any other parts of it, from my understanding. But the ball that would fit into the hip socket matches almost identical with Neanderthal. And what they were saying is, with Neanderthal, they were shorter, smaller in stature because it was their genetic trait for the topography that they lived in. It was more often than not a colder climate. It was, they were shorter in stature because of this. But they said if this partial femur bone, if you look at older African tribes and you look at older South American tribes, they were a lot taller in stature, and they weren't. I mean, obviously, we're all built differently, but they were more built for their climate range. So they have no way right now. They had done no testing on this partial femur. They have no way of knowing if it's human, if it's Neanderthal, if it's part of this quote unquote missing link, which in the theory of evolution, there is a missing link in between Neanderthal and human. Some people believe that it's alien, some people believe that it's another step in the advancement process. But a lot of people believe that these giant skeletons may be in that step of evolution, that missing link. So they haven't done any testing on it. They don't know whether it's Neanderthal that would put it closer to 5'7" or lower, if it's takes after human trait, which would put it closer to 6 foot and above, well above, based off of the size of the actual bone itself. Because I mean, looking at this video, this thing is easily, the ball alone for the hip joint is twice the size of that of a human. It's about a baseball size, where ours is closer to like a golf ball or a ping pong ball. So it's definitely a difference as far as that aspect. They just don't know which direction to go with it.
Oh, well, I was going to say another common trait that they're finding with these skeletons is double rows of teeth. And other genetic anomalies like that. There's
as in
lots
like one
and lots of
behind
stories
the
out
other,
there.
or
Yes,
you're saying
yes, top and bottom.
okay, like
yeah,
a shark.
one behind the other. Yep. Double rows of teeth. Another thing that's interesting about them is most of them are all red or blonde haired. So, that's an interesting link, because if you study a lot of anthropology or anything like that, it's interesting that red-haired, blue-eyed mummies are being found in China. They're being found all over the place. It seems like this was almost a whole race in itself.
Well, And what I find funny about it is a lot of the examples that I found are kind of assumed to be connected to the Norse race itself. And we all know that the Vikings traveled the world. They didn't just go to England and Ireland and all of this shit from Scandinavia. No, they went everywhere. So with that information being that they're mostly red-haired or blonde-haired, fair-skinned, blue-eyed, light-eyed, as far as color goes, it's that makes an extra connection for me to that Norse bit that I found in my research. Sorry to
Right.
interrupt.
No, that's okay. It seems like the research that I've done, it seems like I'm still putting this together too in my head, because there seems to be a page that's missing in history. Okay, like these skeletons that, probably 6'5", 6'6", all the way up to 20 feet tall or 30 feet tall, they are being found all over the planet. And they all seem to be about the same age. And it's like there was a civilization of these people that, some of their genetics may have been passed on and still survive today. But there was some type of cataclysm that pretty much wiped them all out. If you look at, ancient Sumerian texts, stuff like that, those pictures of what was the ancient Sumerian god? I forget his name. But there's pictures of him holding the lion. Like holding a lion like you'd hold a house cat.
It's not a Neil, is it? Or Enlil?
No.
Okay.
Enlil. Yeah, Enlil.
Enlil.
There's there's pictures of him, in carved out of stone, that he's big enough to be holding a lion like a house cat. And other people around him that are actually very tiny. I mean, he's like, huge, and they're like really tiny. He's twice as big as a normal human. Well, why would you depict him that way if he didn't actually look that way? Maybe because of his stature and, place in society, blah, blah, blah. Maybe. But you also have that with hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt. A lot of their gods are portrayed the same way, as being much taller, over the rest of the population. So, does this play into, the fallen angel story? That, these are the Nephilim? Which is interesting, because if they are the Nephilim, the children of fallen angels and man, okay? Fallen angels played with, women, human women. And these were their offspring, and they populated the earth with them. It's kind of a plausible story, since we're finding the bones of them all over the place. Another interesting thing is, all right, they vanished. But their bones are still here. And we're digging them up, which means they are buried in some type of a flood. So does this go to Noah's flood story? Because part of that story, the whole purpose for the flood was to eliminate the Nephilim.
I wanted to touch on something else that you've talked about in the past, since we're uncovering them from the soil, and they're under. It's not like they're ever just a set distance. It's not like modern day humanism where we bury 6 feet under. It's not like that. Some of them are being found in burial mounds. Some are just being found in general land. Could it be like that mud reset that you've talked about in the past?
That's exactly where I was going with it. That leads into the mud flood theory. Exactly. I've been watching a guy's YouTube channel. His name's John Levi. He's been doing some very interesting research in mud floods. Like, it wasn't like it rained, everything got covered in mud. Okay. There was floods of mud in certain places. Okay. And he points a lot of interesting things out because a lot of these ancient structures, like really old buildings, it's almost like all they went and did is dug them out of the mud, like an indigenous population, or like in the case of the United States, when people were coming over from Europe and they were migrating to the West, and they found these buildings and dug them out of the mud. You're talking your city hall buildings, old churches, or what became churches, municipal buildings that they use, stuff like that. It's like, why do these buildings have windows that are 9-10 feet high? Why do they have doors that are 8 to 10 feet high?
That lead to nowhere.
It doesn't really make it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's interesting because he points out in the pictures that the narrative on these places, all right, this building was built from 1850 to 1852, but there's grass, there's trees, where are the construction crews? None of these places seem to have any backstory as far as the actual construction. Okay, so a good one is the temple out in Utah, the Latter-day Saints temple. I forget the name of it. Anyways, they started doing some foundation work on it, and they kept digging to get to the foundation to do some work on it, except they couldn't find the bottom of it. And they kept digging, and there was windows and steps and doors in 4 stories underground that were buried. Now, it just seems odd to me that why would you build a building like that if that's supposedly your foundation? Foundation of modern buildings, like you dig a hole, you pour some concrete, and you build above ground. You don't put windows, doors, steps, things like that below ground. And it was interesting because there is a little bit of media attention about the repairing of this building and the work that they were doing on it, but not a lot. And there was a lot of the media that was actually kept away, especially with photography, videos, stuff like that. They were only allowed specific, to take pictures of specific things. And of course, somebody had to go in and sneak around till they got kicked out and taken pictures to get the pictures of these, doors, windows, steps, stuff like that are buried 2, 3, 4 stories underground. So, like, the more I watch his videos and start putting together these ancient, these giants and this mud flood theory, it seems like it's extremely plausible that there's a lot of evidence for a race of humanoid beings that was completely erased from history.
So that temple you were talking about, that's not the tabernacle, is it?
No, this is the headquarters. It's the main headquarters for Mormons in Salt Lake City. It's an enormous building. I think it's the biggest building in Salt Lake City. It is. It's just, I think it's just called the Salt Lake. Yeah, it's the Salt Lake Temple.
Okay.
The building is absolutely massive. And if you look at the building, that there's so many of these temples, churches, stuff like that, that if you look at the intricate, granite work and the carving and stuff like that, the spires on top of them, it's extremely interesting. It's like, how, I'm looking at pictures of it right now, and just the front doors have to be, I'd say they're at least 12 feet tall. At least. I mean, does that just go to grandeur, or what is it? And it's interesting because you're going to find a lot of in these buildings, a lot of sacred geometry too, which
Yeah.
was another thing that the fallen angels had taught about. So I don't know. We've been lied to. We've been lied to. We've been lied to. We've been lied to. I will stand by that. Our history is not what we've been told by far. It's just
No.
not.
And that's one of the things that I found interesting is if you dive through the web, you can find record of human beings throughout our history being 23, 24, 25 feet tall. Like you said, there's belief that there were people up to 30 feet tall at one point. But through my research, I pulled like one area there was a massive discovery of these giant skeletons that I kind of wanted to talk about, especially since it's so close to where we live. That, like you had stated earlier, when referring to these giant skeletons, on average, we're only talking about 7 to 10 feet. So the term giant, as the aspect that we understand it, at least from the biblical portrayal of David versus Goliath, isn't really an accurate depiction because we have people who have a pituitary issue and they suffer from pituitary giantism all over the world right now. But what I found interesting is that throughout all of this, the Guinness Book of World Records only states the tallest man ever living as 8 foot 11 inches, despite all these other discoveries. And like you said, it may be a case where the Smithsonian comes in, they bury this shit so that it can't be found. They take possession of the skeletons. There was actually something completely different done in the topics that I'm going to discuss here. But I mean, 8 foot 11. So we're talking 1 inch shy of 9 feet tall. And this dude, I'm sitting here looking at pictures of him right now. His name was Robert Wadlow. You can find him right on the Guinness website. They got pictures of him. He is ginormous in comparison to some other people. I mean, most average 5'7", 5'8" men come up to about his belly button in these pictures, and it's unreal. They have pictures of him standing next to cars, everything. So, I mean, in essence, when it comes to a biblical standpoint, though, and what we grew up at least perceiving of giants in stories like James and the Giant Peach, the movie that was out, um, the way the word has been used, it leads us to believe that these giant skeletons were a lot bigger than they actually are. So there's a huge misleading factor on that.
I
But
mean, when I think of giants, I think of like Titan. I mean, I'm thinking like I'm up to the top of the dude's toenail. You know, like that personally. When I think
yeah,
of giants, I think of like blocking out the sun.
yes, and that's at least how I think about it too.
So here's another thing. I think that these giants actually declined in size over time. I think they were as big as like you'd be like toenail height. Um, but that was just so long ago that the evidence of them has pretty much 100% faded out of time, and what we're left with is the 30 foot and under. Another good video is uh there are no trees. What is it? There are no trees on flat Earth, or um it's the title is something very close to that. No trees on flat Earth, something like. Anyways, it's not actually a flat Earth video. It shows a lot of comparisons between it's like, all right, for one instance, Castle Rock in Wyoming, that giant, it looks like a giant tree stump. Okay, if if it was watch the video, it's kind of mind blowing. If I can find it, I'll send it to you guys. He makes really good comparisons between actual tree stumps, trees, how they are, and like Castle Rock in Wyoming. If Castle Rock is actually a silica based, instead of carbon based like we are now, if life was silica based, um, if that is a tree stump, you're talking trees that were miles and miles tall. So, if that's the case, if they were miles tall and who cut them down? It had to be somebody in comparable size. So I guess
Paul
that's where I
Bunyan,
was going with the right. Where
you know.
story of Paul Bunyan. Where did that story
Yeah.
come
I'm
from?
actually I'm actually looking
Anyway,
for something right now. I found it and I saved it just for this. Um I hope I can find it before the episode's up because I want to read it to you guys. It was a Tumblr thread or a Reddit thread, and it talked about this shit, but there's actually pictures out there where people have taken a picture of a new growth forest, something within the last 100 years, but there's these random, like, 700-foot tall trees that are just sprouted up right in the middle of this forest, and there's only going to be like one or two of them standing throughout the entire thing. And I'm really, really hoping that I can find this because the whole thing was a really, really good read and explained it all quite well. But that's kind of where my mind goes too, especially after reading that, because the way this article broke it down is that it was comparing land to the ocean. So with the ocean, I gotta shut that off. Sorry, I had it unmuted for Siri, but with the ocean, the farther down in the ocean we go, the bigger the animals get, and the scarier the animals get. And it was a whole thing comparing, what if that was what life was like on land, where the farther into the woods you went, the bigger the deer got, the bigger the squirrels got, and you might end up coming across like a 7-story tall deer. And somebody theorized that that's actually what old life was. And he put up the picture of this gigantic tree with all of the newer growth, New World trees around it. And this thing would dwarf one of the redwoods in California. It was absolutely unfucking real how tall this thing was in comparison. And that's kind of where I was, led to with this whole thing. Is if that were the case, and that's how the old world was, for me, these giants, quote unquote, it would be undeniable. So
right.
I guess with that being said, I'm going to kind of jump into what I've got here a little bit and talk about Minnesota. So I'll start out with there was a mass burial site found in Clearwater, Minnesota. There were 7 sets of gigantic remains exhumed while digging a well. Each were between 7 and 8 foot tall, and all presumed to be Norse due to the burial mound design and the locations in comparison to waterways and so forth.
Was this just a side note? Was this close to a river?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, both of these examples that I have um, were found I'd say within 100 yards of a waterway, a river, stream, something like that, something accessible by boats, um, something that in those days a civilization or a settlement would have been set up around for ease of access, ease of travel. Now, obviously, with Minnesota, there is huge lore about Vikings traveling there as early as 1000 AD. I say AD. Anybody listening is offended by that. I'm sorry. I'm just too damn old to remember what the new quote unquote politically correct terminology for it is. But yeah, so as
I think it's CE. I think it's
I
technically
don't know what it is,
CE to be correct.
current era is that?
Common era, and
Oh, okay.
before is BCE, before Common
Okay.
Era.
Well, I will try. I'm vowing right
leave,
now.
leave it to me to be politically correct.
Yeah, I am going to vow right now to try to at least change some of my old ass ways and be more sensitive to all of our listeners and not just be stuck on my own self.
Good, because I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and there's been proof found that as early as the 11th century BC, the Vikings were in Canada, and it's not common lore, but it's becoming more common that they came as far as like Minnesota, the Dakotas, the upper Midwest to central north part of North America. But in my research, and I watched a shit ton of YouTube videos on this because I couldn't actually find a lot of good articles. But the one that stuck out to me the most was from Twin Valley, Minnesota. There was a farmer by the name of Roger Saker. He needed some gravel for backfill around the foundation of his house. He was in the middle of crop season. He couldn't get over to the gravel pit because his access to it was blocked by some of his farm fields. And he decided that he was going to start digging around on his own property to see if he could find any gravel. I mean, the gravel pit's 300 yards away ish from what I could see in the video. So he's figuring, all right, the gravel pit's that close. I got to have access to it on my property somewhere. So he starts digging around on the property, seeing if he can find some gravel, and he ends up coming across 3 different skeletons. And 2 of them, once all was said and done, he kind of realized that it was a burial mound construction. But 2 of the 3 skeletons that he came across were average sized. They were believed to be Native American female, and they were in the fetal position at the feet of the quote unquote giant's skeleton on either side of him. The one skeleton that was giant was estimated to be between 8 foot 6 inches and 10 feet. This estimate came off of 2 different readings. The skeleton's grave, or the giant's skeleton, was marked by a not really a headstone, but a marker stone, which was more commonly used in those times. Nothing engraved on it, but it was a bigger stone, really common or out of place to be set in that one specific position. And from his memory of where the skeleton's head was in relation to that stone, they measured it out to where his head and feet would have ended and came up with 8 foot 6 inches. But a friend of his had used divining rods. And for anybody who doesn't know what divining rods are, they're also known as water witching rods. They're copper rods. People who can use them could walk along a plot of land with them and they'll stay straight. And then as you come across a underground spring or creek, underground river, creek, anything like that that runs through the property, they'll cross. But they can also be used to find bodies, find other different things. In this episode I was watching, the guy was finding various pottery artifacts with it, just by any time it would cross, they'd throw down a flag, come back and dig it. Anyway, when he was using the divining rods suggested that this skeleton was 10 feet or more. At this time, he had called the local law enforcement agency and had basically said, hey, I came across a couple of skeletons buried on my property. You guys need to come and check this out. They showed up. He continued digging a lot more carefully, uncovered the giant skeleton, and the law enforcement officer said, hold the phone. We got to call the state's archaeology department and get them in here on this. This is something that we can't just handle. They've got to come in and do it. So they came in and they exhumed the two Native American female skeletons that were in a fetal position. And this Roger Saker said that it seemed like they wanted to hurry up and rebury this giant skeleton right away. They didn't waste any time. They got the Native American women out, and then they just went to backfilling this property. What I found interesting about it is later on in the episode, he talked about how they couldn't dig there to try to dig up the skeleton. Now, this obviously leaves open interpretation for skepticism, because it could be just what he's saying so that they don't dig there and find nothing. But according to him, the state's archaeology department had labeled that section of land a Native American preserve and no soil. He couldn't even plant a crop there if he wants to now. They cannot touch a blade of grass and remove it by its roots on that soil anymore. So as you go on and say that the Smithsonian comes in and scoops these things up, I think there's another way that they're covering these up. And whether or not those two smaller average size skeletons were Native American or not, I think there's a possibility that they might be labeling these protected ground so that nobody goes in there and finds out what in the hell's actually really there and exposes it.
And that's actually pretty common also, in the research that I've done. Okay, nope, sacred ground, can't touch it, and walk away. How easy is that? I mean, they just rubber stamp it and walk away. You can't put a shovel in the ground, like you say. You can't touch it. So,
Well, and it falls back on that falls back on the Mayan remains in Georgia too that we talked about in the Georgia Guidestone episode. As soon as archaeologists and researchers started flooding to that area to start looking at these possible Mayan remains, it was already on a federal reserve to begin with, but now they made it to where you have to go in there, A, by permit, and B, made it almost impossible to get a permit to go on there and research any of this shit.
Yep. It disturbs the narrative.
Yeah.
It completely disrupts the narrative that they give us. They would have to rewrite the entire world's history. And I think the part that they're most worried about is anything being tied biblically. Like, in Genesis, in those days there were giants. You don't want that.
It's funny that it's funny that you say that, because the video that I was watching with that partial femur, the scientist who was the main focus of the video talking about all of the facts and everything said that any time they find something that could be a possible giant skeleton, people from the Vatican, people from like that headquarters in Utah, all of these higher ups for every different religion are right there down their throats. Is this a giant? How big is it? How old does it date? They're looking for like a verified proof of David and Goliath, is what he mentioned. And he said it's unbelievable how many times in his career he has been misquoted to try to tack drive that agenda home.
Yep.
Just so that they can be like, all right, here's another thing. It's kind of like the search for Noah's Ark. Everybody is out looking for Noah's Ark from all these different church groups, the higher levels of these religions, to drive home the word of the Bible. And yeah, see, here it is. We have proof. You can't deny this now. All these atheists, all these Satanists, you all have to change your ways. And he said it's unbelievable. Every little discovery, every little thing, they're basically beating down his door.
Yeah, I believe that. They don't want it. They don't want proof. They
Well,
I don't know. It,
in
it
this
goes
case,
back
the
to the
church,
controlling cabal.
yeah,
It does.
in this in this case, the church does want the proof, but it seems that general population outside
Right.
of the higher ups in the church want to cover it.
And see, that's the thing. They take it for themselves. They bury it in the basement, and that's it. Nobody else hears about it. You only have that very select few people that actually know the truth. That's the problem.
You have something like this farmer in Minnesota, this Roger Saker, who, if he does go out public with the information, sounds like an absolute fucking kook
Yep.
because he was one of only 6 people to see it. Who else saw it? Okay, let's say the average law enforcement team runs too deep to a car. So it was him, 2 law enforcement officers, maybe 1 head of state government outside of the archaeology department, and 2 archaeologists. That's 6, 7 people.
Yep.
And
Yep.
how easy is that to bury?
Well, and that's the thing. You're told not to talk about it, and if you do, you could maybe be sued. Maybe they have you sign a non-disclosure agreement. Who knows? It's craziness. When was that ball?
Let me pull up the video to see when that was posted to YouTube. I
Like,
will.
yeah, I'm curious to know when that discovery was by him, because between like the 1890s and 19 teens, that's when there were tons and tons and tons of these reports of giants being found. It was, a big push for, at the time, modern day archaeology, right around the turn of the 1900s. And it's interesting because then again, it goes back to like the mud flood theory or whatever, where John Levi is putting those videos out at the same time that like all these giant buildings are being constructed and dedicated for whatever use. It's I don't know, I found it kind of interesting because he's got a number of videos that he shows what ended up being insane asylums, these buildings with 1, 2, 3, 400 rooms in them were all insane asylums. It's like, were there
Yeah.
really that many crazy people back then, or was this that we just need a designation for this building that we found? What is it? It's just, it kind of blows my mind that you know uh, somewhere in podunk nowhere just happens to have a 200-bed insane asylum, but the population of the county is 50. It doesn't make any sense. But I was just wondering about the timeline for that.
So I'm working on that more, but I wanted to. I talked about some of the 2 episodes in particular that I watched on YouTube, or 2 videos about, and there's a ton of them out there. But the 2 that I was referencing in this episode, the first one is going to be a video called "When Were There Giants?" and it is by WITS, WITS University official YouTube page. And that's the one where the scientist is talking about the partial femur.
Oh, okay.
And then the other one, involving this Minnesota incident, which I started here, and now I'm kind of deep diving everything to get you your answer. But this is
Yeah.
from the History Channel, and it's from America Unearthed their series called America Unearthed, and the YouTube video is America Unearthed Giant Bones Uncovered. It's from season 1 and it's episode 4. It is the full episode
Okay.
available for free on YouTube. But in the meantime, I'm gonna kind of dive into this and see if I can get you a date of when he found these.
Another little interesting tidbit. This is actually a personal story for me. Back in 1996, I was sitting in my high school parking lot, listening to the radio in my car, and the news came on. It was lunchtime. I was a senior in high school, and this news report came on that a giant skull was found between Wasaki and Crivitz, Wisconsin, on a farm. They said it was the size of 2 basketballs. And it was just, something this crazy catches, it kind of catches your attention. So I turned the radio up, listened to it, and, local farmer finds blah, 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 this, giant skull the size of, like 2 basketballs. They're both the size of a beach ball. I remember I'm saying basketball, two basketball sizes. And that they were waiting for a visit from the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian Institute was called. This was right in the news blurb. Okay. So that was about the end of it. It was found. They were waiting for, anthropologists or whoever to come from the Smithsonian and, kind of update us later on it. Interesting find, what are they talking about? Anyways, I spent over 2 weeks listening to every, news broadcast that I could, watching the TV, the local TV, news, the news from around that area, newspapers, every piece of media I could find back, in 96. So, I mean, we're kind of before mass internet. Scrubbed, gone. I can't find, even with today's internet searching, I cannot find anything about it. There was that one news article on the radio, gone, scrubbed. Can't find anything about it. I know it happened.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. I just searched, giant skull, Crivitz, Wisconsin, and I've got nothing that comes up. Just to add credence to what you're saying.
I can't find anything about it, and I haven't been able to find anybody else really that remembers it. I think I talked to you about this, Paul, a little bit, and you said
talked
you
to
might.
me about it, and I recall hearing something about that. It wasn't like lunchtime or anything. I remember because I mean, let's face it, I was almost 10 years old. I would have been in 4th grade.
See, I was still shitting my pants and eating dirt in 96, so I can't help you here.
But I remember being in the car. I don't remember if my mom had picked me up from school or if I had just walked home and we went somewhere after school. But I remember hearing something about that and her and I talking about it. I distinctly remember it.
It's something so off the wall to hear, a giant skull, what? And the part that got me is the Smithsonian was mentioned in that news article that they're coming in. And then, researching and watching videos today where the Smithsonian comes in and shit disappears all the time. There's even weird speculation out there that there are so many of these skeletons being found that Smithsonian picks them up, puts them in boxes, puts them on a boat, sends them out in the Atlantic, and just dumps them overboard because they have nowhere to store them anymore.
Well, that's one of the videos you shared with me throughout the last 2 weeks now, leading up to this episode, had a map. And it was a world map. And it had all kinds of little purple figures. And I'm going to go through the phone and I'm going to try to find that video so we can tell our viewers or our listeners
That I
what
know
that
right where to
video
find it.
is. Yeah. But, I mean, that it wasn't speculation that that's where these things were found. That map was actually produced with those pinpoints being verifiable giant skeleton sources.
Yep.
And they're fucking everywhere. Everywhere.
Well,
So,
those are just
I
the
mean,
ones that
this
are
isn't
reported
just a-
on too. You know,
Yeah. And it's not that it's
And
just a
haven't been
localized
buried.
phenomenon to one continent or another. You know, it's not like we have South Africa and fucking the Midwest of the United States are the only two places this is happening. No, it's fucking Greenland, Iceland, it's Ireland,
Everywhere.
Great Britain, Scandinavia, Russia, it's Asia, it's everywhere that they are finding these. And I'm sorry, with how prevalent the fuck, I'm having a brain fart. The pituitary diseases, with how prevalent that is in today's society, and how, and not, I shouldn't say prevalent, but with how rare it is in today's society, unless there was some sort of fucking radiation off gassing somewhere from a natural source, you're not going to convince me that it was more prevalent at any other point in
Chemtrails.
time in our history. You're not going to convince me that there was just like this massive strain of 200 years where pituitary gigantism was a common fucking occurrence, and it happened to almost every person born. Not going to happen. I'm sorry.
I think
I'm calling bullshit.
I think the actual percentage of giantism in our population today is 7/1000ths of a percent of 1%.
Well, let's find out.
The
it
video,
can't be much. I wouldn't think.
It's very, very low. The
Yeah.
that video that you had referenced, it's Woodward TV, and the video is what you need to know about giant discoveries. That was the video. But Woodward
Yes.
TV has a lot of good videos. I've been watching that guy for probably at least 4 years. He's got a lot of good
So
stuff. There's some of his stuff that I don't really agree with, but he does good work.
This is coming right from diseasedic.com. It says pituitary gigantism is a rare disorder most pediatric endocrinologists may see at most 1 or 2 patients with the condition during their careers. In one large series of 2,367 children and adolescents with pituitary adenomas, only 15 or 0.6% had pituitary gigantism. So, I mean, yeah, you were pretty much fucking spot on, because you said what? You said
Not much.
0.6, right?
I said like 0.7, but whatever. We're splitting hairs at that
I-
point.
I mean,
We don't have any hairs
Yeah,
left to split.
right.
Yeah, you're talking about one person and 100,000 difference between the actual number and what you said. It was fucking spot on. So yeah, there's no way in fuck you're gonna tell me that there was just a great outburst of this shit. And no, fuck off with that shit.
Right.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Not happening.
So I'm really convinced that there was this some type of reset, in history. It's just there's so much that we're finding that it doesn't fit anywhere in the timeline other than it got taken out. I made mention in another video about the talking to the guy that was going to school for archaeology. Mentioned to him about the Viking artifacts, which you were just talking about Vikings being in Minnesota, and I'm not talking the football team.
Well, and that's the shitter. And I'm sorry I got to interrupt you here again, but you mentioned how it fucks with the narrative. Okay,
Yep.
they don't. In that episode of America Unearthed, they also went and looked at a sword. I didn't get to finish the episode. I'm not gonna lie, I was watching it right before we went and recorded this episode, and I ran out of time. But there was another farmer who was a homesteader in early Minnesota that found a sword. And I mean, they don't want to. The idea that there's a possibility that Leif Erikson discovered America and it wasn't Columbus. Any pre Columbus discovery of America by those other than Native Americans is absolutely fucking frowned upon. Fuck my life.
So I mean, I could be like looking too far past this, but why does that matter? Why does it matter that Christopher Columbus discovered us? Who gives a shit if Leif Erikson did or not? Like why do you think people are trying to hide that?
I think it's because it would completely rewrite a lot of history, like Jake said earlier. I think that what you have is massive, 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 massive amounts of generations who believe what we've been taught.
So what?
And if you were to go and change that, and I understand where you're coming from, because there's discoveries that change history every day.
You know what I'm saying? Like if I all of a sudden they're like, yeah, Leif Erikson founded the United States, okay, it doesn't change my life.
Well,
it means
here's
nothing to me in an everyday life.
Here's the thing. It's kind of a domino effect, okay? So, all right, we go back. Leif Erikson instead of Christopher Columbus. Okay, not a big deal. When did you know this? Well, we've been looking at it for a number of years. Okay. What else do you know? Well, the Indians didn't come across the ice bridge. Native Americans, they didn't come across the ice bridge. They came from someplace else, because we found DNA that, oh yeah, that's right, they're probably Mayan. Came from South America. Well, okay, well, what else does that change? And it's a domino effect. And once you get far enough down the line, they've lied. They've known about this and they've lied. So you lose trust. And there becomes no way to cover it up. Okay? And then it pushes into everything else. Problem being, I totally understand what you're saying, Jamie, because even if all of it came out, we actually live on flat earth with silicon trees that were 300 feet tall, blah, blah, blah. And there's aliens. And they're in
I
the
still
government.
have to go to work the next day,
Nobody's going to care. They have got us at the point where nobody cares. The bank still wants my mortgage payment. My cell phone, company wants the payment. Nobody cares. So the thing is, it disrupts the foundation of everything that they're teaching us, which is literally nothing in today's school. I got kids in school.
Well,
they teach it.
And so here's the thing that chaps my ass about the Leif Erikson burial. And I'm sorry, Jake, that I interrupted and we pulled off on this whole fucking tangent. But
Fine.
so Leif Erikson, it's at least admitted that he was in Newfoundland. If we look at the word Newfoundland and how it's found, it's actually newfound land. Kind of falls in place with how the Vikings name things, right? But
Right.
going above and beyond that, I'm going to kind of give away where I live, kind of where Jake lives, going to kind of give away where you grew up. And I don't
Just
think
a side
we're
note,
big
you
enough.
realize you guys have done that like 10 times already, right?
What's that?
I guess so. I
Yeah.
mean,
You have, it's not, I mean, if anybody's actually paying attention, there's no way they don't like know already.
it hasn't been hard to put like 3 and 3 together and come up with
No,
6.
like you've literally said Iron
7
Mountain
different
like
times.
10 times. I mean,
Yeah. Anyway, so obviously we live in the UP of Michigan. In the UP of Michigan, we have Highway M95, U.S. Highway M95. Why in the fuck in the middle of the Midwest are you going to have U.S. or not U.S. Highway? I'm sorry, State Highway M95 dedicated to Leif Erikson if they weren't fucking here before Columbus? M95 is the Leif Erikson Highway. Fucking explain it. I can't. Unless it's true.
Unless, the Upper Peninsula has a lot of ties to Vikings, and he was kind of a famous one, and somebody knows that more about that than we do.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, so there is so much different heritage, and you could blame it on homesteaders, you could blame it on this, you could blame it on that, but there's so much different heritage, and there's so much shit found to point to it that Leif Erikson discovered the United States before Christopher Columbus. And going back to Jamie's question, I think a lot of it would disrupt the obviously what happened with the smallpox incidents and the Pilgrims and the Native Americans is a horrible thing. So again, I don't. I feel like it goes without saying that this isn't me talking about this isn't me agreeing with it, but I think it disrupts the narrative of the demonization of that quote unquote mishap. Even though to this day we still celebrate Columbus Day, even though to this day there are people who protest Columbus Day because of the smallpox incident with the Pilgrims and all that other bullshit, I think if you have another society that can come and interact with the Native Americans and not have the story that goes along with Columbus's interactions and the Pilgrims' interactions with the Native Americans as a society, it goes against whatever greater agenda they're using that for. Because like I said, here we are, 500 years later, still fucking talking about it. Nobody's talking about the Vikings being here before that, even though that there is plenty of other articles and plenty of other proof. It falls back on a few episodes when I mentioned Oak Island and why any of those discoveries could be detrimental and why everything is being dated around 14th, 15th century and nothing earlier. And Jake mentioned that it goes against the quote unquote agenda. I think it's all kind of being controlled for protection of numerous different things. Anyway,
Well,
rant over.
And that's the thing. Why lie? It's a great question. It's almost to the point where they have to keep lying just to keep everything under wraps. It's a domino effect. People lose faith in all of it and throw it all out, which goes to control, which goes to wherever you want to go with it. It seems stupid, on a like a layman type level, because like I said, who cares? Who cares? We still got to go to work tomorrow. But in the grand scheme of things, it definitely matters. It definitely
Yeah, that
does,
makes sense.
you know.
That's,
I guess I guess to put it in like really really stupid simple terms, what it, what if they admitted to this and it ended up through trickle down effect uncovering the actual new world order? It does exist. We can't hide it anymore. You guys are finding way too much stuff. We already admitted to lying about way too much stuff. Okay, here it all is. Now we've got to put it out right in front of you, and now you have. It's
They
like
already
Jake
do.
said about. It's like Jake was talking in the chemtrail episode about the other planets and why you'd want to hide it. Now you have a population, a whole world population, 7.5 billion people, I think we're at right now, that are in mass panic because of this information overload of everything that they've had to now come out and say, yeah, we bullshitted about that. And now you're going to find out about this. Now we might as well tell you about it. You're fucked either way. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change your day-to-day life. It's still going to keep going the same way, but you're still going to have those extremists that try to do something to change it.
I don't know. I just feel like you could pretty easily play it off as like, oh yeah, like the Michigan DNR did with mountain lions. Yeah, yeah,
For
we're gonna admit
years
it.
and years
You know what I
and
mean? Like
years.
we all knew, but
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know.
It's
But on the same note, they were eventually forced to admit that.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But then
You know, so
eventually they were just like, "Yep, we finally have proof," and it's like you've had proof for more than my lifetime. No. Now we have proof. You know, and but then who pushed it? I mean, nobody pushed it after that. Nobody pushed to say, okay,
Yeah.
you guys we had proof. Like, okay, you're admitting it now, but like, what about the lies over the years? Everybody just finds like, finally, they've admitted it. You know, and I don't know. I just feel like the same thing maybe could happen with
this
this.
one's easy.
Yeah.
But then I guess at the same time, I guess what
They didn't have
on
the
the
budget.
contrary of my question, well, what would it solve if they did admit it either? It's not like everybody's gonna be like, yeah, the American government's awesome now because they tell the truth. Yay. Like you know, it's probably not gonna solve much by admitting. So I guess I just completely circle us around with an absolute moot point. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
And
And
Jake, to
I
answer
think
your question from sorry, I had just real quick to answer your question from earlier. I cannot find any date as to when the farmer from Minnesota, Roger Saker, actually discovered those bones. There is nothing
Okay.
on it. The only information I can find on him or that bone discovery all surrounds the episode of America Unearthed, and that is it.
Okay. I'm going to guess that was probably the early 1900s, probably somewhere between 1900 and 1920, more than
Oh
likely.
no, because if I had to guess, so the episode aired in 2013, and during the episode I'd say he's early to mid 50s.
Oh, wow. So this was actually relatively recent.
Yeah, I'd
This
say it
wasn't like
was
a news story that they picked up.
no, if I had to guess, I'd have to say it probably occurred anywhere between 85 and probably
okay.
2008, 2009-ish if it aired in 2013.
Okay. Wow. I'm surprised that being that recent that any information got out, because I mean, like the story that I told, there was like one little news blurb and it got scrubbed. So that's really interesting, actually.
Speaking of Minnesota, I actually came across an article here too of another discovery in near Delavan, Wisconsin, in 1912. So again,
Lay it
a
on
little bit
us.
of years ago, but I mean, recent enough. You can actually still find somebody actually scanned in the newspaper article from back then. You can actually pull it up on your whole page and read it. But basically, the New York Times actually reported on it May 4th, 1912. There was a mound excavated near Lake Delavan in southern Wisconsin, and it was a couple of brothers. I believe they were doing excavation work, and they were going to build some kind of business or something. I think they were digging for a foundation of some kind of building. And in that mound, there were 18 bodies measuring between 7.5 feet and 10 feet tall. They had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, as well as double rows of teeth, like Jake said before, and large elongated skulls. So
that was one of the other things that I was going to mention too, is the 6 fingers, 6 toes. Is
I
a
forgot
lot
about
of the
that
ones
one.
that are found.
okay,
Yeah, a lot of the giant, quote unquote, giant skeletons that are found
yeah,
have 12 digits between the two sides.
that'd be kind of sweet. Just an extra finger.
Extra.
You could still get a
Oh.
good grip on your beer
That-
bottle and drink it classy with your pinky out.
Right. There's lots of things you could do with an extra finger.
Yeah.
Not going there. Not going there.
But yeah. So I mean, proximity to Minnesota, right? I mean, and looking for articles too. You know, like we were talking before, negating any of them that have gotten scrubbed. I mean, I was finding articles from, I mean, damn near every state in the United States of records of giants being found in mound, and it's always mounds too. That kind of struck me, I guess, that it's like always a burial mound. It's always a mound. You know, it's not like they just found one body somewhere. It's usually like they find multiple bodies in like a mass grave type situation.
Generally more than one.
Yeah. I guess
You know,
maybe mass
mound-
graves, a
mound
little
burial.
intense, but, you know.
Yeah, but you know the mound graves, I forget what it is. It was like a common burial practice to do mounds instead of digging holes. I forget why, but most of them are mounds. You know, unless something happened where mud flood, something like that, where they got buried like an unnatural death. You know, if it was natural, it would be a mound, which is interesting because I do believe like the Vikings, they used mounds too. I'm
They
pretty sure they
did,
did.
but you know the thing that threw me too, and I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if it was saved for certain stature within the community, but they also did the quote unquote Viking burial at sea, where if you
Okay.
perished, they would put you on a wooden structured raft with a pile of wood around you. They basically entomb your body in wood, lay you on top of it, build it up kind of around you, push you out river, lake, ocean, wherever they were, launch a flaming arrow at it, and cremate you that way, for lack of better terms. Obviously, I don't think it got hot enough to actually cremate a body.
No.
But
it's like an insane
it was one of the, yeah,
like
it
2,000
was
shit.
it was an actual practice done. Fun fact about cremation though, and this will fuck with a lot of people, because after I read it on one of the sites that I browse through when I'm going and laying down at night, your life will never be the same after I say this, but it is life changing to think about the fact that at one point in time during cremation, human meat is perfectly cooked to the correct temperature for consumption.
Mhm.
There you go.
I mean,
now that's something that you're going to think about.
Hang on, I gotta go get the salt.
I'll still sleep just fine at night.
Just saying.
What's that, Jake?
I'll go get the salt. I mean, I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that one. I'm not.
No, it's just... Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about it, so when I read that, I'm like, fuck, my life is ruined now. I have never... I I've gone from wanting a burial to a cremation, and now I'm probably back to wanting an actual burial again because I don't want to think about the fact that at one point in time during my cremation, the dude could be sitting there saying, "Yep, okay, 400 degrees. He's been there for 15 minutes. All right, time to pull him out
It's
and eat. They're good to
lunchtime.
go."
Yep. Well,
Yep.
I kind of want to go
see when
missing.
that's going to come up.
Like,
Like
I just kind of want to go
alien
missing.
abduction.
And like, I mean, whatever. Like, I want to be like Fat DB Cooper. Like, nobody ever finds me. Like, it's just like I get like they make podcasts about me. Like, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not jumping out of a plane. Let's not get crazy. But I mean, you know, like an urban legend. Like, fucking, I don't know. He went missing and we never found his body. Like, that's kind. I think that's
I
all I
mean,
want to.
If nothing else, we can start the rumor. I mean, you know, in this
Yeah.
one episode that Mothman was
Right.
hanging out in the window behind him, and
Yeah.
we
I thought
could
I
go
saw
all over
something
the place with
moving.
that.
And there was reflection. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think it'd be kind of cool.
I mean,
Be remembered.
I'm gonna put it to you. I'm gonna put it to you this way, and it comes with the utmost love and respect for you. I don't think anybody is kidnapping you. As I recall you saying on one of our episodes
No,
to your wife when she was pregnant, you told her she was hard to kidnap.
Yeah, she was.
You are permanently hard to kidnap.
Absolutely, 100%. Mm-hmm.
That is nothing but pure fantasy for you at this point in time.
I mean, I feel like the aliens might have some kind of hoist. You know.
Yeah,
they gotta have some heavy equipment that can just.
I mean, evidently the tractor beam takes cows no problem. So
there you go. I'm good then. I think.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be that. I can't see, you know, the aliens, you know, ordering, you know, a winch off of Amazon to. So let's go with tractor beam. Just saying.
Yeah. It makes the story sound cooler, if nothing else, right?
I don't remember what movie or comic or TV show it was from, but there were aliens trying to kidnap one of the characters. It might have been like Cow and Chicken or something, not to date myself by the cartoons I watched growing up.
I haven't thought about that cartoon in like 15 years.
I think it was Cow and Chicken, and the aliens were trying to kidnap Cow, and they couldn't get Cow's fat ass off the ground, so they just fucking gave up and left and found another fucking experiment. That's the aliens coming for Jamie. They're just, no, this one's too big. Fuck this. We're out. We're gonna go find somebody else.
Start shorting out the tractor beam.
It was either that or it was South Park or South Park. They were trying to kidnap Cartman's ass
I could
when they put
that,
the anal probe in him. And he'd fart and that fucking satellite dish would come out of his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I hope that doesn't happen to me, but
well, if you watch the movie Paul, with falling back into what Jake theorizes about Hollywood and mainstream media and the quote unquote magic, putting things out there for us to see, the movie Paul would be just a gigantic, hey, here it is, it's right here in front of you, we're telling you about it without actually telling you about it.
Right.
But according to Paul, they don't do the anal probe thing anymore, so you're good to go on that.
Sweet.
Glad we have confirmation of no anal probe.
Yeah.
I gotta go watch that movie. I fucking love that movie. I laugh hysterically every time.
It's pretty funny.
Seth Rogen was so fucking good as that character. I couldn't imagine that alien being voiced by anybody else.
But, you know, on a serious note, the soft disclosure they give us of things is just off the charts. If you know what to look for, I can't even watch a movie anymore. I really can't. it'll be going along plot line and main characters and blah blah. I'm looking in the background. I'm looking at what's going on, like all the subliminal stuff. I can't watch a movie because I have no idea what happened. No idea what at the end of the movie credits start rolling. I'm all like, oh no, this is crazy stuff. Play it again. I still have no idea what happened. It's kind of wild.
You and I were talking about that this week. You and I were talking about that this week. You had said that I'd probably hate watching a movie with you, just
Mhm.
because you'll be sitting there watching it and you'll start pointing that shit out. No, dude. I told you, I'd fucking eat that shit up. Point all of it out. I want to know.
Oh, look,
Just
look. Oh, pause. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. I've done this with people before, and they eventually end up hating me because, you got to pause the movie, you got to rewind it or back it up,
You
full
gotta
screen,
watch it.
whatever. Watch it. Okay, see this? Okay, then you got to go into the whole explanation of what they're looking at, and they're like,
Yep. And you got to talk
"Whoa,
about it. And an hour and a
yeah,
half movie takes 6 hours to get through. But God damn it, dude. I mean, let's face it. You and I could talk fucking your entire workday all week long if everybody else let us.
yeah, easily."
There's no doubt about that at all. I mean, I think I've racked up more airtime on my phone talking to you than I have my wife the entire time we've been together. No bullshit. And
I've just spent 20 years putting all kinds of dumb shit in my head.
but
Oh,
yeah,
and
I
I
mean
love talk, but yeah.
it's fucking crazy.
So,
3
you
tits.
know,
That's fucking awesome. Back to the movie, Paul again.
six,
Sorry.
six fingers, 6 toes, and 3 tits. Wait a minute, wrong movie. So, another interesting thing, you mentioned like Lake Delvin, Wisconsin, and this Minnesota place. There's another place. It's Rock Lake, Wisconsin. Okay, this is another one. This is down by Madison. Um, Supposedly there is an underwater pyramid down there. It's a pyramid in the middle of just an inland lake. When I guess somehow the story goes, like, I don't know if it was, I think it was divers actually went and dove the lake, and they run into this thing, and come to find out there's a pyramid in the middle of this lake. I just find it interesting that this is, south central Wisconsin to southwestern Wisconsin into Minnesota. There seems to be a relatively large area right there that there's some really anomalous stuff. And then going down into, I think it's just outside, oh, where is it? It's in Iowa. There's more native mounds right there in that corner of the world too. Let me look it up here real quick. It's I want to say it's Dubuque, but that might be wrong.
So, in reference to your Rock Lake Pyramid in Lake Mills,
Yep.
Wisconsin, there is actually a YouTube video that I just found because I had never heard of this. So I started searching it right away after you mentioned it, just to read about it a little bit. There's a YouTube video out. It's called The Ancient Underwater Pyramids in Wisconsin, and it's by the YouTube channel UFO Mania. The truth is out there. If anybody wants to check
Okay.
out these underwater pyramids.
You
But
know, and it but
all I was going to say is what I did find on it, a short little blurb about it, is the Sauk Native Americans speak in their legends of a sacred site closed by a lake. The Sauk did not construct the site and related structures. This was done by ancient peoples who were driven away when the lake flooded.
Yep.
So, just little fun fact on that one.
Another page of history that we're not taught. And in the same area, it was Dubuque, Iowa. I believe it's just north of Dubuque. There are burial mounds there. Those are supposedly Native American. So I mean, they may be legit, but then again, you can't go look. You can't dig them up. You can't find out if they're normal sized people or if they're giants. But they are right in that same
So
general area.
here's my thing about that, especially with like the burial mound link. We already know that there has been iron tested from Greater Europe, for lack of better terms, whether it be Scandinavia, Ireland, Britain, um, Austria, anything over in that area. We already know that there is different minerals, whether it be iron or copper or anything like that, that can be traced back to the Midwest and like the UP, Northeast Wisconsin, and Minnesota primarily. But then you also add in the crossover that these fucking civilizations are all using mounds. One of them learned it from the other. Whether it was the Scandinavians that brought it here and taught it to the Native Americans, or vice versa, or whatever, not just the Scandinavians, the Vikings, anything like that. Whoever it was, you have all of these different cultures using the same thing. It was a learned process. It wasn't something that was just discovered unilaterally across all these civilizations, and it's just pure coincidence. Not gonna happen in my book.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way it's just a coincidence.
No, not at all. Especially, like I said, when you look in at other factors like minerals, iron, copper, all of that being found in other parts of the world from our general area. It was like you talked about a couple episodes ago, the copper from up by Houghton Hancock area.
Yep.
That's been found how many different fucking places. Yeah.
Yep.
It's such a unique copper that it could never be mistaken, and it's only unique to that area. It's never been found naturally occurring anywhere else, yet here's tooling and jewelry and plateware and whatever made with that copper.
And you ask archaeologists about it, and why it was found in the Middle East or ancient Persia or whatever, and they're like, crickets.
Yep.
Crickets. Nothing. You get nothing. Well, why?
No.
Doesn't fit the narrative.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm at a loss on it all. I out of all the episodes that I thought were gonna make me tap out and be like, fucking somebody give me an explanation, I didn't think that this was gonna be it. I really didn't, because we're tying this into so many different things that we've talked about where it's never really hammered home, but now it's all kind of just lumping together and making me go, oh, why the fuck can't somebody just say something? Fucking give me proof.
No,
it's right
now you
there.
understand my frustration.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I've mentioned this in a number of episodes that it's power, control, and lies. Just lies. Our whole history, they've lied to us. Somebody knows. Back in the episode, the Vatican episode, I think they have the answers. I think the Smithsonian has the answers. I think somebody knows. They know. They're not telling us. They don't want to tell us. They don't have to tell us. There's no way we can make them tell us, because we're just crazy conspiracy theorists and we don't know nothing, blah, 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 blah. Who are we? We're just average Joes on a podcast.
They're about to get their fucking doors kicked in by the feds.
Oh, finally, maybe we'll get some answers. Maybe. Did we?
Please do.
What? Too many hits on the algorithm.
Maybe that's how I disappear. Maybe that's how I go missing.
You have to bring in a fucking deuce and a half.
Dude, you guys have this on video too? All of a sudden, you just see like some hand. I'm like, what the fuck? And hands just, poof, and there I go, gone.
Poof, oh, gone.
Let them try.
That'd be kind of sweet.
But...
doesn't do anything to that like tractor beam that they suck you up with. Just saying. Shoot all you want.
I mean, as long as I can get it in my hand before I start floating away too far, they got to get my fat ass through 2 different ceilings and a whole ass roof. I'm going to grab every arsenal I can on my way out the door, and I'm going on that fucking ship with it.
Oh, yeah. You got to go. You wait till you get on the ship and then go for the Blaze of Glory action.
Oh, I'm going to be fucking Fat Jack Sparrow commandeering the Black Pearl. I'm going to tell you that right now.
You're gonna be fat Kurt Cobain and eating that fucking thing.
That's a possibility too, I'm not gonna lie.
Paul hanging out the window of the UFO with a
pirate
hat on and no shirt.
Yeah.
With a what hat on?
There's a pirate hat on and no shirt.
Yeah. The little fucking trifold hat or whatever.
No, I'm gonna be hanging out. I'm going to tell you what, I ever commandeer a UFO, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going and I'm sucking up a fucking couple cartons of Marbreds with that fucking tractor beam. My ass is going to start smoking that day. I'm going to need to just to cope with the fact that now I do know for sure that aliens exist and I'm fucking driving a UFO. You're going to see me fucking ripping an ass through Iron Mountain at the speed of fucking light, hanging out the window shirtless, beard flapping in the wind, cowboy hat on, a Barbred hanging out of my mouth with half a dip of fucking Copenhagen in and shooting every fucking gun that I own out the window. Just yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Sounds like you've been smoking meth.
And here I am trying to figure out what the funniest bumper sticker is I can put on the back of his UFO. Oh. Wow. So, anyway,
do you know what the difference between that? Do you know what the difference between that UFO and a porcupine would be? First, I gotta preface this by telling you the first thing I'm doing is coming and picking both of you two motherfuckers up. But the difference between that UFO and a porcupine, the porcupine's got the pricks on the outside. The UFO would have the pricks on the inside.
Nice.
Could you imagine if you rolled up into my yard in a UFO? Dude, I'd be like fucking Beverly Hills Ninja up on the roof of my house, just fucking rolling around, fucking shooting at you, dumbass.
Oh God! Especially if I didn't call you to tell you first.
Oh,
I just like
full blown brain aneurysm I'd be having.
Snap of my fingers, I end up from wherever I'm at where they kidnap me over the top of your house. I'm just like, dude, it's me in a hail of fucking gunfire.
No.
You still wouldn't trust it. I could fucking tell you shit about our childhoods and you'd be like, nope, they got you. They got your brain. I'm not, not happening. I'm not getting on that motherfucker.
Taking me alive.
Nope.
Nope.
And then Jake's over here just like, fuck yeah, dude, let's go.
Yeah, can we stop at a liquor store? Just saying.
Yeah. Let me on that bitch. I want to see some of this technology.
Take me for a ride. We're going to find out.
What's this little button with the house on it? Next thing we know, we're 17 different fucking galaxies away and surrounded by the fucking grays. Oh, anyway, I don't know. Do we have any
I'm going to have to cut about 25 minutes of this episode off.
No, you leave all of that in there. I swear to God. I swear to God, I'll cry if that doesn't make
adjust your judgment.
Most of it'll stay in.
Do we have any more information about giants, boys, or are we about ready to wrap this up?
There's tons. Kind of like beating a dead horse at this point.
It's not like you can't say the evidence isn't there. You know, it's one of those things. Like a lot of things we'll talk about, a lot of it might be speculation, but I mean, this is one of those things where the bones are there. You know, so
yeah, tons of news articles, tons of lore, it's all out there. There's lots of it, and when you research it and dive deep into it, guaranteed you'll be hooked. And you will start to see that we've been lied to over and over and over and over again. You know, it's one story after another. These stories from like Native American tribes, every single one of them has something about a giant in it. You know, every single tribe has a story of giants.
Yeah.
All kinds
Yep.
of indigenous people all over the planet. There's, news articles for like 20 years in different newspapers that talk about them. It's all over the place, Yeah, there's a lot of disinformation out there. There's so much of our history that has been altered, changed, or left out completely. You go to the Grand Canyon. Why are there parts of the Grand Canyon that are named after Egyptian gods? It's very strange. Oh, that's right, because once upon a time, I think it was like 1908, there was an explorer out there. He found a cave, bunch of ancient Egyptian stuff, along with like Buddhist and Hindu stuff in a cave. Guess what? The news article says that the Smithsonian showed up, took everything. Smithsonian strikes again. So
Maybe
look
the
that one up.
Smithsonian is the Men in Black. Maybe the Smithsonian's like a cover.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why not?
Go fuck yourself.
They show us stuff.
Yeah.
They show us some stuff. They keep some history, so it looks all benevolent.
Right.
They get billions of dollars from the government, or millions at least.
And nobody questions it because they're preserving history, right? I mean, hiding in plain sight, right? What?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, it's plausible.
Why not? It seems they almost have to. Who else is doing it? The CIA doesn't care. They're off doing their own whatever, hauling in heroin from cartels in Mexico or whatever they do. The FBI doesn't care. They're doing other things. Not the NSA's job. Who deals with history? Who deals with these anomalies in history? Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Do I want to demonize the Smithsonian or any of these other agencies? No, not really. I don't care.
No, right.
I've said time and time again, I just want them to stop lying to us. They take the coolest stuff and they bury it.
Right. How cool would that be if it was proven to be true that there was, Paul Bunyan actually existed? I mean, that's awesome. That's like your childhood, right? It's like childhood stories coming true. What's cooler than that?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. How cool would it be? You got this giant skull from this 90-foot human or whatever. You're taking selfies like sitting in his mouth and, big teeth.
Right.
How cool would that be?
That would be really sweet.
And that's the thing. All right. Giants were here. Vikings were here. Awesome. We live in a cool place. Are you just trying to make it uncool 100%. Or boring? Do they want it just to be boring?
So, side note, I mentioned earlier in the episode that I was going to browse through my photos and try to find it. I did find that Tumblr thread. I did save it that I was talking about, and I know our viewers can't see this. I guess we should try to find a way either to put, I think we'll post it to the Facebook page so that if anybody wants to go and see it, they can see it at the Skeptaholics podcast Facebook page. But I was able to find it. I'll read it and I'll show you guys the pictures that were included with it. Because when I was going through it, it starts out as something that seems kind of drab and mundane, and I wouldn't normally read because there's a little kind of like a comic included with it. But just for shits and giggles, I hung with it just off of the first Tumblr post, and then all of the replies after that are what kind of hook, line, and sinkered me. But it starts out, imagine if the oceans were replaced by forests, and if you went into the forest, the trees would get taller the deeper you went in. And there'd be thousands of undiscovered species, and you could effectively walk across the ocean. But the deeper you went, the darker it would be, and the animals would get progressively scarier and more dangerous. And instead of whales, there would be like giant deer and bear, and just wow. And the first reply says, "You have a beautiful imagination." And then the second reply is the reply of the little comic. And the little comic is just two young kids, and it reads, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, what, are you scared?" "No, I'm not scared. What? I just think we might." And then the kids are looking, staring way up. And they see, I don't know how well you guys will be able to see this, but there's a giant deer walking. Let me tilt it that way. Giant deer walking through the woods right there. And it says, "Get
I
lost,"
can't really see
is
it
what
there.
the kid was saying to finish. Well, I'll send it to you guys so you can read through it or look through it or whatever. And then the next reply said, "This gave me chills." Another one says, "Holy shit." And then this reply says, "First of all, love this," pointing up to the main part of the thread. "Secondly, I've said it before, but this is exactly what the old world was. Offshore there was ocean, and inland there were forests. Here's an old world tree still surviving in a modern forest of quote unquote large trees." And you can see how much taller it is in comparison to the other large trees. That's just what trees used to be like. And wandering among those trees, one might have encountered, yes, deer larger than a modern moose, but also, depending on what year, pigs bigger than grizzly bears, beavers the size of modern wolves, ground sloths the size of modern elephants, and bears nearly that big. Not to mention the insects and snakes and shit. I could keep going, like, you might have crossed paths with a whole herd of these. Or a family of these. This is an it's Elas motherium, a big rhinoceros that existed as early as 29,000 years ago, also known as a Siberian unicorn. Like 29,000 years ago, the last of the Neanderthal had just died out. Humans and this thing definitely lived at the same time. And they didn't live in the forest, but there is one ice age creature that's still alive. If you want to see what life was like back in the day, we used to think the muskox was a type of bovine or cow, which is how it's got its name. But do you see this? It says that yep, it says that, my friends, is an ice age goat. That's right, a 900-pound goat. Here, take another look. Two of them fighting like goats would, is basically all it is. And it says, anyway, yeah, the wild used to be a lot more wild than what we perceive it as today. Old Forest was definitely the inland equivalent of the depths of the ocean, and everything back in the day was turned the fuck up. And then the final reply on it in this picture thread is, "This post was made by someone's genetic memory of those scary fuckers." So, I mean, that was the thread that I was referring to as far as the trees and shit go. We'll post that up on the Facebook page so that if any of you want to go and check it out, it'll be there. And I'm right after the episode, I'll send it off to both of you so you guys can see the pictures a little more clear.
Here's a thought. I guess I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. I heard an interesting theory. Okay. All the dinosaur bones, okay? They find dinosaur bones all over. And okay, say like a T-Rex bone, they'll find partial skeletons. They'll find two or three, four or five bones, and then they put
Don't.
together all these
Don't.
skeletons.
No, don't get me started on this. No.
Okay, wait a minute. This is a specific question. Okay, they say that they find these things. Okay, I know most, if not all, dinosaurs that are in museums, they're all plaster casts. They're not actual real bones. But what if the bones that they do find and tell us that our dinosaurs are actually the bones of giant humanoids? And they had to come up with a cover story, so they came up with the entire dinosaur story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like completely out on dinosaurs at this point anyway. So, it's not like I don't know. I don't think dinosaurs were anything like the way that we're portrayed. So, I mean, yeah, it's not. I this is gonna sound a little wild, I guess, but I think that dinosaurs were kind of like dragons of like old lore, hollow bones, maybe flight. I'm not gonna say they're running around like with magic and breathing fire, but I don't think they're like we see Jurassic Park. I don't think that's accurate at all. And I have no like facts, I guess, to base it on, but just like my opinion. So yeah, to say there's some kind of a humanoid, yeah, that's not reaching for me at all. So
Okay. Now, Paul's salivating here. He's gonna explode if he doesn't talk.
I am going to finish my cookie. I've got one bite left. I'm gonna take. They're Keebler fucking chocolate chip cookies with M&Ms. You lick my asshole. These things are like fucking angel sweat. They taste so delicious. But I'm gonna finish my cookie. I'm gonna take a sip of water and then sit down and fucking buckle
listeners out there that are just like clinging to the edge of their seat, waiting for your response, and you're eating a cookie.
Okay. Buckle up, because when I was shaking my head and saying no, don't get me started, you got me fucking started. So, humanoid, no. Could it be a possibility when you sit back and look at it? Okay, you find a giant fucking femur. We got to come up with a way to kind of disguise this possibility. Not what I buy into at all. So, yes, there are only like 4 or 5 bones per skeleton for most dinosaurs that they have found. You also have the switch about 10 years ago where we've got to remember that every single dinosaur that they have pieced back together, we obviously do not know what the dinosaurs look like. We obviously don't know whether they were scaled reptiles, kind of like turtles, crocodiles, etc. We don't know whether they were feathered. A lot of modern day birds are believed to be ancestors of dinosaurs. So I don't think that's too far-fetched of a theory. I'm going to make you fuckers laugh at this point in time, but know that this is coming from the utmost seriousness. Gooses are fucking pricks with rows of teeth. You will not convince me that a Tyrannosaurus Rex is not an overgrown fucking goose. Not going to happen. Here's why. Now that they have come out and said that, it's more likely that these dinosaurs had feathers than they had scales.
Oh boy. Okay. Keep going. Keep going.
They were prehistoric gooses. Or chickens. There's some sort of fucking cock-eating bird that just, you look at it and you know it was a prick. I'm all down for that. Okay? It's either that...
Giant asshole.
Yes. 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 I mean, you see all the videos online of people getting chased by these white fucking wedding gooses and shit like that, and Have you ever seen a goose's teeth? They're fucking terrifying.
It's the fact that he keeps saying gooses for me. That's what's doing it.
I mean, I'm still talking about a single goose. A goosen. I'm not gonna say. Have you ever seen a geese's teeth? No. Have you ever seen a goose's teeth? A singular goose.
Goose is possessive. That's the first time you've used gooses correctly. Every other time before that, you were talking in pluralities and saying gooses.
I was just
whatever. Have you ever seen geese teeth? Is that better? Fucking Nazi. Anyway, it's either that or I buy into what kind of like what Pants had said. I buy into the fact that they were probably dragons. If you look at the skull structure, if a Tyrannosaurus Rex's skull is actually a Tyrannosaurus Rex's skull, and it's not a fabricated a casting. It's not a fabricated thing to cover something up. I mean, that's probably the most plausible animal for the description of a dragon throughout history. So
yeah, and actually, I'm kind of right on the same page with you guys. I think when you hear indigenous stories about dragons and things like that, I'm willing to bet that people were walking with dinosaurs on this planet at one time. And that becomes our modern day dragon. I really do.
And in people in the sense of somebody above and beyond Neanderthal, because it was obviously, I mean, like that Tumblr thread said, somebody's genetic memory had come up with that theory. And I mean, there's, I think that, and I always have in science, excuse me, science is beginning to show that there is a high probability, not a possibility, a high probability that humans and Neanderthal walked the earth together before Neanderthal's extinction. So
I think I was listening to a video not too long ago that they've actually they're starting to come out with that. I don't know if it was Robert Sepper had a video on it or somebody else, but it seems to be a pretty common theory that like DNA is being found, that those two groups of hominids or whatever did walk together on this earth.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When we talk about the missing link, people have so many different theories about what the link is. It could be Bigfoot, it could be an undiscovered species, anything. For so long they've thought that there's such a vast span of time in between Neanderthal and human. Now that science is starting to come out and carbon dating has become so much more accurate, not only becoming a thing in our lifetime, but becoming as accurate as it has within the last couple of decades, that it's being able to show these different things. I don't think that personally there is really a missing link in between Neanderthal and human. I think if you were to look at it from the theory of creationism, why would human, and I've said the same thing about aliens, why would human race be God's only experiment? If you look at it from a theory of evolution, you have different species evolving from different bacteria in different ponds. They're receiving different nourishment. They're receiving different elements. It's all kinds of different things. I don't think there's a missing link. I think there is just different quote unquote experiments, for lack of better terms, if that makes any kind of sense. Especially with, like you said, the science coming out now that they walk side by side. If there were a missing link, there would be a span of a couple of centuries in between the two.
Yeah, there's evidence coming out that they walked together and they breeded together. So,
Well, I mean, Christ, how many people have done something like a 23andMe or the Ancestry one or anything like that where you get your genetic DNA back and have had Neanderthal DNA? And I'm one of them. So, fun fact, my sister-in-law bought the whole family a 23andMe a few Christmases ago, and we all did it and sent it in, and I'm one who has Neanderthal DNA. I found out that I have Potawatomi Indian in me, and I never knew that about my ancestry. There was a lot of cool things that I found out, and yeah, as fucking tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist as I am, the government now has my DNA. But I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, it was kind of cool to see all of that different shit, and I learned a lot about my genealogy.
Right.
But that was one of the coolest factors for me, especially with that news coming out that they walked and bred and everything else, to see that I had that structure in there.
Right.
Which Jamie's over there shaking his head like, fuck, does that ever explain a lot?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a stretch at all. The forehead and everything. I mean,
Forehead, what are you fucking talking about? I don't have a hairline anymore.
it's kind of flat.
But anywho, yeah. I mean, if we got nothing else, I guess we'll wrap it up. Jamie,
Shut her down. No, I'm
final
good.
comments. Where do you stand on it? We haven't done that in a while. We've just kind of cut episode.
Plausible.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
Plausible.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much of history that's lost because it's either been covered up or it's gone. That
Yep.
I can't sit here and consciously say, "Yep, it never existed." Like it has to be at least plausible.
Yeah. If I could make a recommendation, go look at some of Woodward TV's videos. Go look at Robert Sepper's videos. Robert Sepper is an independent anthropologist. He has some amazing videos. He does really good work. Check it out. See what you guys think for yourself.
All right. Well, with all of that being said, thanks for another great episode, guys. It was an enjoyment as always. I don't know who needs to hear this, but brush your teeth and scrub your ass once in a while. And we'll catch you all next week.
I feel personally attacked.